I was invited to the Duke contest in 67.
Okay.
I was with Jock Sutherland and Jeff Hackman and that whole crew, and they were kids. I was 23 years old, and I could legally drink, but Jeff and Jock couldn't, so they said, Pop, can you get us a beer? Get us a beer. I said, sure. So I went and got them, smuggling them beers in the Royal Hawaiian. But here's poor Duke sitting by himself, stuffed up in the corner. So I got them a beer, and I went straight to Duke and sat down and spent the night talking with Duke. And we talked about how he first came to Australia and introduced solid wood surfboards to Sydney in 1915. But just talking to Duke about the old days, and he was so humble and so nice, and he had the same buzz, though. He had the stoke when you got onto specific waves he'd ridden, and the enthusiasm, his eyes lit up. He had the same stoke that we all have.
That's Bob McTavish. I'm Jamie Brisick, and this is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from FCS, Finisterre, Howler Brothers, Outerknown, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, the Journal delivers 136 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more and to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. This episode of Soundings is presented by Costa Sunglasses. If you're anything like me and you spend lots of time around the water, then you know just how important it is to have a good pair of shades. And since 1983, when a group of intrepid outdoorsmen set out to make sunglasses that could stand up to the harsh environments they regularly encountered, Costa remains the choice in eyewear among those committed to life on the water. So whether you're diving in, climbing a board, suiting up, sliding one, leaning back, or all the above, head to costadelmar.com to grab your pair and to see what's out there. Born in 1944 in Queensland, Australia, Bob McTavish started surfing at age 12 on a 16-foot plywood paddleboard. He was Queensland state champion in 1964, 65, and 66, and finished second to Nat Young in the 1966 Australian national titles. Bob is best known as a surfboard shaper. He started shaping at age 17, working with Sydney's biggest board builders of that time. He was a major player in the shortboard revolution. He worked closely with George Greenough and Nat, helping Nat design Magic Sam, the thinner, lighter, shorter longboard that would win him the 1966 World Championships in San Diego, California, pushing surfing towards the up-down style we know today. Bob was obsessed with the idea of riding in and around the pocket, cranking hard turns and banging the lip. In 1967, he produced the first V-bottom, nicknamed the Plastic Machine. Shortly thereafter, in a glimpse of the future, Bob and Nat Young were seen tearing it up at Honolua Bay in Paul Witzig's The Hot Generation, a surf film that introduced the world to what the shorter, high-performance boards were capable of. In the late 70s, Bob wrote several essays for surf magazines, talking up the long and mid-range boards he was shaping. In 1989, he launched Pro Circuit boards, molded plastic replicas of the designs ridden by top pros. In 2009, Bob penned Stoked, his memoir. The feature film adaptation is presently in the works. Now 80, a father of 5 and a grandfather, Bob is sprightly, cheery, bright-eyed, a glowing example of how surfing can keep us young, light, and bouncy. We spoke at his factory in Byron Bay. Surrounding us were surfboards of various shapes and sizes, many of them brightly colored. I had the image of us in one of those giant ball pits for kids. Bob McTavish, welcome to the show.
Unreal, Jamie. We've been trying to catch up for quite a while.
Yes. I was waiting to do it in person, and I'm so happy to do it in person because to see your factory, to see all the boards, to be very close to the waves that you spent a lot of time riding, I think brings something to it that no digital compromise can do.
We're sitting outside my shaping room in amongst a rack of boards. There's foam dust all around us everywhere. Some daggy old bits of junk, and it's very authentic.
Yes, yes. The V-bottom, you invented the V-bottom. How did the V-bottom come about?
I had a dream, and not spiritual, not anything like that. I'd still dream of surfboards, so it's very common. But I had a dream of me surfing Sunset Beach, and I was going on a 10-foot day, and I was driving up and down and driving along the face vertical. And I went, whew, that's like George does on his knees. I've got to make a board to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first saw George in 1964,
George Greenough. Yep.
And 64, Bob Cooper was glassing at Hayden Kenny's at Alexandra Heads when Noose is just up the road, and that's why he was there. And that's why I was shaping there, because Noose was just there. Mm-hmm. And George knew Bob Cooper, and after his fishing season, he'd made lots of money from lobsters that year, he decided to come to Australia to visit Cooper. Mm-hmm. So Cooper lobbed, didn't have room to put George up, but we did. Us, the sander, the gloss coater, and myself shared a flop house. So George is welcome with us for the next 6 weeks or so. So I'm shaping away one day. We had immediate connection with George, right? Immediate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of his incredible nature to talk interesting.
Yeah, sure.
And you're just captivated.
Yeah.
So from the moment I met him, it was a 2-hour listen session. But watching George the first time, I was shaping away, and Algie Grudd, who was the sander, came rushing, Bob, come across the beach, you've got to see this. This is George is surfing. So he was riding his 4'8" solid balsa board called Velo, no flex, it was solid balsa. And he was driving off the bottom, up into the lip, running out onto the shoulder, doing roundhouses, back onto the whitewater, down, repeat. And we went, that is incredible. Mm-hmm. I want to do that, standing up.
Yeah.
So I immediately pulled a blank and slapped his board onto a blank, his original balsa board, drew around it, sorted out, shaped his bottom shape into it, and made it like 2 inches thick, and glassed it, surfed it out the front, and it was piddly little day, 18 inches, 2 feet. Me and Russell Hughes, who's a great surfer, we both ride it and went, no, too small, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. If we'd taken it to Tea Tree Bay or National Park at Noosa on a good 6-foot day, it would have been a different story. Mm-hmm. But we pushed it aside in 64. Meantime, we were captivated by Dora. We'd come off a high with Edwards and Midget, who were surfing beautiful, elegant displacement boards. George is planing and skidding across the surface of the water, whereas all other surfing was displacement surfing. Mm-hmm. Take off, paddle in, turn, trim, set the rail, step forward, get the maximum trim out of the board. Even Yater was there that year. Mm. He came in 64 as well.
Okay.
So we're exposed to Greenough, Yater, Bob Cooper, and Cooper's stories of Dora, because he'd hung out at the pit half his life. Mm-hmm. And so we could extract the best Dora stories. And we'd go to see beach party movies because Dora was dancing in there on the set, like as an extra. Uh-huh. I mean, just to see Dora. Yeah. A glimpse of the man. Mm-hmm. And then round it out with Cooper's stories. And then Bruce Brown said the incredible line of, he said, Phil Elwood says that Mickey Dora is the most advanced surfer in the world, and he doesn't really understand half of what he's doing. And here's Dora at Malibu, sideswiping and switching his way down the line through the crowd. And we just went, we've got to do that and do it as good or better. Yep. Cooper told me a story that he was surfing at Malibu, and Dora was screaming down the line, popped out through the back of the wave, surfed over the back of the wave, and then pulled back into it again.
Wow, kind of a floater.
A floater, which was never called that.
Sure.
And so we immediately started doing that at Noosa. Mm-hmm. So we were doing floaters in 64, 65, and trying to take it further. But we were severely hampered because we were riding displacement boards.
Yeah.
So in 67, that's when I had this dream of surfing Sunset Beach going up and down. And I said, right, I got an offer to go to Sydney and get $10 a board for a shape job. Boards were selling for $90, and I was offered $10 a board because I was the leading shaper in Australia at the time. So I said, yep, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to go down there and I'm going to make boards that can surf like Greenough. I'm going to make boards that plane over the surface of the wave, not displacement. So in April that year, I was parked in traffic, stuck in traffic going to Keogh's to shape one morning, and there's a V-bottom boat, a tinny, we call them in Australia. It's an little aluminium 12-footer, 18-footer. It had the deep V, and I'm going, oh, I know V boats are unstable in flat water, but they're really great when they're moving through the water. They're very stable. So what if I did a V? So I asked George, he was living with us, and I said, George, what do you think? Whack a V on it, because we've got such wide boards. I want to be able to roll them and drive up. And he said, well, yeah, we'll try it. It'll really help a wide tail bank. And so I told Nat, and Nat immediately cut a V into his 9.5 that he'd made for the Australian titles in April of 1967. Remember, he'd won the world title in 66.
Yes, on Magic Sam, which was a smaller board, and it was more up and down.
9.5, yep. And it was a great board.
Yeah.
But in April, we set off to Bells Beach to the event. Now, I still had my freaky concepts going about getting vertical. So I convinced Paul Witzig that he should let me make him a freaky little 6'6". And a guy called Rob Keneally, who had a great surf shop in Bondi and a very good surfer, he said, yeah, well, I'll get one too. So I made two 6'6" with double concaves, nose to tail, and a V in the tail. And they both had one. I went down with Paul or John Witzig to the event. I also took along a 9'8" George Greenough inspired gun, which was massive with a big wide 10-inch tail and dead straight rocker like a Greenough. And I took a stock involvement board like Magic Sam. While they had the event at Bells Beach, I camped round the corner at Winky Pop, and I just surfed Winky for the whole event. I didn't appear in. They didn't see me. I was around the corner riding all kinds of different boards. I found the two little boards I'd call Genesis because they were the beginning of the shortboard thing. I rode those two 6'6", and they were too stiff. The double concaves were freaky. I didn't put enough rocker in them, and I rejected them again. I said, no, wrong track. They didn't have much V. They were very flat, double concave and too strong, and I just put them aside because they were just fast as hell, but no comfort in manoeuvrability. So I pushed them aside. I pushed the 9'8" Greenough gun aside, and that's rubbish too. Came back to Sydney after that event. Nat won it on his V bottom, his 9.5. Sam with a V bottom.
Yeah.
And he was doing incredibly strong turns. You can see this in Hot Generation.
Yes, I was going to say Hot Generation. Was Nat going vertical at this point?
No.
Okay.
No, it's starting, but Nat was getting huge drive off the bottom. So then I went back to Sydney and I said, right, I've got to tackle this again. So first I made a 9-foot plastic machine with a 6-foot concave in the nose for nose riding and long V panels. And I paddled out one morning at 10 a.m. at South Avalon, and I came in at 6 o'clock that night. I surfed for 8 hours straight because the board had big V panels in the tail, and the sensation of driving and accelerating you'd never experienced before, because you didn't have roll bottom and soft tail rocker.
Right.
You had these strong panels.
Yep.
So it did nose ride unreal as well. It just happened to be. But the next day I just went, end of the nose ride, goodbye Phil Edwards, goodbye Mickey Dora, goodbye Californian lead. We're going out on a limb. I'm going to make an 8-footer. So I cut a foot off the length virtually overnight and made that 8-foot version of it. got that in the water and went, oh, here we go. Because you could bury the whole rail in the turn. It was compact enough that you could bury the whole rail. And the deep V definitely gave the board the ability to bank like never before. So I started shaping plastic machines. I designed that logo off the Mellow Yellow Donovan album.
Yep.
Printed it up, and it was the first psychedelic logo in the country. And away it went. And Kevin Platt was my sidekick. We were shaping side by side at Keogh's. And Kevin and I were shaping up to 20 a week each, side by side.
Wow.
Neil Purchase was fin maker, and the sander was a guy called Brian Hughes, who I had a beer with last night in Sydney. And Danny Keogh allowed us to go for it. Okay, so halfway through winter, it was spring. Nat fell in love with this really great skier from Australia, like an Olympic skier. And Nat disappeared up into the slopes for the whole winter. So come spring, he walked into the Keogh factory, looked around and saw a rack, 8-foot boards everywhere, when the whole world is still 9'6". And Nat walks in and said, what? Why didn't someone tell me? And he immediately shaped one and put it in the water a week later. And he grabbed me and Albie Falzon, the photographer, and said, come on, I'm going to ride this board. Come on, watch me. So we went into Long Reef. First wave, Nat just gouged these bottom turns and accelerated out and wrenched these big cutbacks. It was high planing over the face. The second wave, he broke the fin in half in a turn, 25 layers of 6-ounce cloth. He snapped the fin with the power that he could drive into the turns. I went, that's it. There's the future. I mean, the fin broke in half and the board flip-flopped to the beach. And Nat swam in and said, well, that's it, 2 waves. I said, Nat Young and the short V-bottom, that's going to blow the world apart.
Yeah.
And it did.
Yeah. I'm so intrigued by it because what I find fascinating is you described the Dora style of surfing, more trimline-based surfing.
Yeah.
How did you kind of imagine that surfing could have the up and down and the going vertical when it wasn't already happening? I mean, was it just the extension of what you saw? Was it the dream, or what was it?
George, Mr. Greenough.
Yeah.
It's what he was doing on his knees, which is, that's it. That's the Greenough contribution. Because the lines that we draw now were George's lines.
Yeah. But the going vertical, I mean, that was maybe beyond what George was doing, or was it? Yeah.
It was. George had a lot of limitations. George doesn't like to surf over 8 feet. And but he likes a barrel, and he was pushing us into barrel riding. I mean, we already were barrel riding, but he took it to the next level. But the trouble with George's design, it did not translate to stand-up surfing. But we didn't have the wisdom to see that for a long time.
Yeah.
And he has dead straight rocker. I mean, I've got boards around here that I've made like George's. Dead straight rocker and this funny bowl up front. And hull, if you like to, that's George's term. Dead straight rocker is evil on a stand-up surfboard. Dead straight between your feet is manageable. But at your back foot, you have to add tail rocker. You've got to wash the tail out. Yeah. Because we're standing so high, our centre of gravity is so much higher than George's. George on his knees can grab the rail and pull the thing around a turn. He can free fall out of the lip and grab the rail and put it under his knees. Yeah. We can't do that. Yeah. And when you hit the lip and drive back down, you can't have dead straight rocker. You just plunge into the wave. You nosedive into the wave. Yeah. And it took a decade to get rid of the Greenough thinking. Interesting. And it wasn't until the late 70s that the only thing that rescued us through the 70s was V-bottoms because they created rail rocker. I see. So we did have some rocker, but only because we had V. And I think Brewer helped there because he called it the spiral V, whether it is spiral or not, but it became pretty standard play that every board had some little V in the tail, which gave it rail rocker. And some rail rocker. Not enough, but some. Yeah. And I didn't understand it fully. I always thought we had to have a flexible tail board. And I believed that for the next, up until the late 80s, I believe we had that we'd end up like George with flex tails. And we tried all sorts of things. Finally, when we got boogie foam, I made a full flex tail and glued foam, dead straight rocker, but flexy corners.
Yeah.
Glued boogie foam on it to give it the buoyancy, shaped the boogie foam, took it out at a place called Flat Rock. First wave, flying down the line, go, yeah, great. We got the speed, up, hit the lip, driving down, nosedive. Because as soon as you go weightless and the rocker flattens out, you're driving the board vertically into the water. There's no relief in the tail.
Yeah.
So George didn't need it because he can twist the board in midair and just grab the rail.
Yep.
But we, stand-up surfers, had to have tail rocker to act as tail feathers.
Yeah.
Behind your foot, you need your surfboard from behind your foot. You got a super strong engine between your feet, flattish rocker, double concaves into your front fins. But from there backwards, you have to wash it out. You've got to reduce the volume, you've got to reduce the area, and you've got to leave something to keep contact with the face of the wave.
Yeah.
So I'd call them tail feathers. You watch a hawk, he's not generating lift off those feathers in the tail. He's always lift from his wings, but his tail has got control. And that's why we need any decent surfboard has got tail rocker.
Yep.
And these points and reduced area, I mean, I'm looking at talking over a fish here. It's got a nice wide swallowtail. But the area from those fins back is reduced dramatically because of the swallowtail. And the tail rocker allows this part of the board to act as tail feathers.
I see.
All your engine is in here.
Sure.
And once we established that, which was kind of late 80s, and when I saw Merrick's boards that he was making for Curran, I mean, bingo! Merrick's got it right. He had the double concaves up to the front fins, and then washed the concave out. He had a little hip in those days for Curran and reduced tail area. He had tail rocker. He had then elegant noses, which were just your radar, sensible rails that could accept all kinds of water flows striking and carrying it down. So tail rocker made modern surfboards. And the other thing it did was it created a foil. If you think back to early 70s or late 60s, 69 was probably the worst year for surfboards because they were short, but they had down rails in the tail, high in the nose, and often result in a big S deck. And that's why Tom Morey called his the camel, because it had a big hump on the deck. Those boards were evil, just pure evil.
Yeah.
And even Brewers in that era, that he had the same problem. He was up in the nose, down in the tail, straight tail rocker. And I took one out I saw Don Morley and Greg Weaver lobbed into us in 68 from California, and they had Larry Strada copies of Brewers. And they finished sanding them at our factory and went out at Lennox. I made a copy one day. As soon as I saw it, I said, this is what Brewer's making. So in mid-68, so I made one. Went out at Lennox with those guys. Took off on a beautiful, clean wave, and the thing accelerated and was super fast and with a great template and flowing. I went out my shoulder for a roundhouse cutback, and it went, just sucked into the wave. And I fell off and went, what? Second wave, same repeat, barrel inside, everything's great. As soon as you run out on the shoulder and roll it over, the water flow came over the deck, and because it was a longer distance for the water running over the deck than over the bottom, because the bottom had no rocker, dead straight, and the deck had this hump on it in the tail, you've created an airfoil, a water foil that's on the deck, and as soon as you got it wet, it pulled the deck into the wave.
I see.
And I fell off. The board tumbled into the rocks at Lennox. I swam in after it. It was pretty dinged up. Took it up on the point. I said, I'm never going to let anybody ride a surfboard like this again. And I tore the glass off it and smashed the fin off it, kept the fin and burnt it on the rock, burnt it on the beach. It was in innermost limits, and it was a green board. And, mate, I learned that huge lesson that you've got to create a foil in your flow, and tail rocker equalizes the difference between the deck and the bottom. You part the water up here, it travels across the bottom, travels across the rail on the deck, joins up at the same point at the tail. You have a neutral foil in the board. And I went through a great surf shop in California last week, and I looked. It had 300 boards in the racks, and I went through them quickly, and I looked. So many alternate boards haven't got the correct tail rockers.
Interesting.
It's still misunderstood by so many shapers, but it's okay in shortboards if everyone just copied Almeric.
Yep.
Once the shaping machines, it just became generic.
What should they know? Because I have a feeling there are going to be many listeners who are shapers.
Well, you're talking 3 dimensions, and it's hard in a conversation, but you have to create a symmetrical foil in your rail or your water flow, imagining a board banked in a hard bottom turn, and you've introduced water over the deck to some extent. You still want to keep it dry enough that your foot's not dragging, but when you part the water at the front, you've got to open it up and reunite it at the tail at the same point. It's got to be equidistant over the top rail and the bottom rail. Otherwise, you suck in your cutbacks.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Merrick nailed it.
Yeah. At what point did you begin to obsess over surfboard design?
To obsess?
Yeah.
When I got the sack from the radio station when I was 17, and the programs were going back covered in surfboard drawings. But even before that, when I was 12, Dad bought a 16-foot plywood board. I've got a copy out the back there. And I rode paddled out on it for the first time at Currumbin. I was a body surfer before that, right? And you're always in the impact zone.
Sure.
You live your life in white water.
Yeah.
So I paddled out past the break, and for the first time, I'm the king. I'm in control. The ocean is coming towards me, and I can select whichever way I want. Every way I like. I'm the king. This surfboard thing is phenomenal because you can select what you want to do with it. I'm 12 years old. Got the thing turned around, choose my wave, paddle in. The thing just went flip, bomb, and rolled into the beach.
Yeah.
What a disgusting surfboard.
Yep.
So that week I made myself a hollow boogie board, the same dimensions as Tom Morey did later, 4'8" or 49 inches by 22 inches, and it was hollow, and I rode that until I got my hands on, when I was 15, that was 12, and by 15 I bought a beaten up balsa board, stripped the glass off it and reshaped it.
Wow. Had you done carpentry? Had you worked with your hands before that?
I'm hopeless.
But you love surfing so much.
I love surfing.
Yeah.
But I've really got to watch myself when I'm shaping because I can be pretty rough, because it's concepts I'm interested in. And there are so many good shapers around who are so accurate with their tools.
Yeah.
And having just come from the boardroom and seeing like Michael Arenal and seeing what he did in the final against Ryan Birch and how I had to go over it with such, with straight edges and measurements everywhere to separate the two. But Arenal won by a hair's breadth.
Wow.
I mean, love Birch's work, but Arenal's got technique, man.
And are you still as psyched on surfboard design as you always were?
Of course.
Yeah. Do you fall asleep thinking about it a lot?
Absolutely. Wake up in the middle of the night, my brain just goes to surfboards.
Do you have a notepad to write it down?
No, I come and talk with my son about the ideas, and then I pick up a blank and start working on it. And in this room, as you can see, we make everything from 5'4" to 14-footers, and
yep.
And we love them all.
Yeah. I've been here staying in Byron for the last week and moving around, and I know you've been here for quite some time. One of the things that it's fairly obvious, but it also is it is striking is how the waves are the waves kind of provide this incubator for design that and then I think about Santa Barbara with George, Greenough, and Rincon, and other point breaks up
Rennie,
there.
Yater.
Yes, Almeric as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting could you be a great shaper if this was just a kind of closed out beach break in front of us?
No, a great shaper won't live near a closed out beach break.
Yeah.
No, I settled here because there's surf here 350 days a year,
Yeah.
literally, and it's got warm water.
Yep.
And it takes. I moved to Lennox really.
Mm-hmm.
Straight after Sydney, I moved to Lennox, and because it was empty, and it would accept up to 12 feet from the south, and no one lived there.
Yep.
My wife and the first kids, and there's just a few little local surf rats, and I was the blow-in, and lived there for 30 years, and another 20 years here in Byron.
Mm-hmm. Reflecting on all your years of building surfboards, is there a period that was the most kind of fertile, generative, the most inspired period for you?
Yeah. The board I made in 68 was a bit of a freak. Because January 68, or actually late December 67, I'd gone from Honolua Bay in hot generation and gave away the V bottom. Never going to ride one again in my life because it spun out so badly. And I was staying at George's place in Santa Barbara, Montecito, and Rennie let me shape in his room and gave me a blank. Mm-hmm. And I shaped a really nice high sevens, like 7, 8, something like that, in a really classic template. Because I'd been in with Brewer in his shaping room in Lahaina before that, looking at his elegant lines. So here you are in Australia riding plastic machines, which are kind of blobby, and then hanging with Brewer, we had beautiful needly guns, and then I sawed the tail off with Brewer on Jerry's board, and in turn made the first mini gun. It was 8.6. Then go straight to George in California. So I've got a head full of great lines in my head after Brewer. So in Rennie's shop, I made this really sweet board. But then along came Carl Pope with bigger ideas and said, "Bob, we're going to do a model with you." Sorry, Rennie. You could keep that board. I didn't surf it. And I went down to Maury's and hacked out what I call the Rincon model now. And it was 710 by 21 and a bit, 2 3/4, with nice eggy rails. Pretty flat bottom, little bit of V in the tail. And Rincon just fired up in early January. And I just had the best board. And I'd already known what I wanted to do with Rincon because of talking with George so long. Yes, since 64 now to 68. So I've had almost 4 years of George telling me about the indicator and photos of it and who'd made it from indicator. Like Yoda made one right through past where he was renting his house with Sally on the point, and apparently Dora's made one right through too. And I'm going, that is the biggest challenge. It's getting from indicator through to the highway. So I said, right, here I am. I've got the board. I've got the only shortboard in California with a flat bottom and a really beautiful fin that I made with George at his house. So we'd paddle out at the river mouth, George and I, on his high planing spoon, the flex tail spoon. The two of us, we parked on, he knew someone had a house on the point, so we'd park right in there, not on the highway or in the car park it's there now. Paddle out the creek mouth. We had ruler edge swells through January and February. Paddle out, pick the biggest set, the widest set so that the power would land fair on the bowl, one each. And we were just driving and turning and driving and turning and driving and turning from way outside indicator, approaching the bowl where there was up to 50 people sitting on longboards. And we're pumping and driving and pumping and driving. And there'd be half a dozen guys in the bowl would start to paddle in, but they're looking left and look down there to see if you're going to make it. Most of the time we would get through the bowl. A couple couldn't help themselves, would drop in. We'd just come flying through, over their tail box, out onto the shoulder, do a roundhouse. They all wipe out. Their boards would just tumble, their 10-footers would just tumble into the rocks, and you just ride the inside point down to the highway.
Wow.
Pick up your board, repeat. Do that half a dozen times. Go to Taco Bell and power up on carbs, come back and do it again all afternoon.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Devon Howard last week. It was really funny. I said, getting through there, I said, Devon, I did that 20 times.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went, no, Devon, it was actually 80 times.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I had to grab Devon by the shoulder and say, this was the most powerful thing I ever did in my life, was surfing.
Yeah.
To make a surfboard that could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that, I came back to Australia and the tracker era happened and we got down to finer tails and then the Hawaiian influence of the 70s, with Jerry and BK and Tom Parrish, and we went down that route into gunnier boards, fooled around with every kind of fin through the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Had 3 fins running in 1972, twin fins earlier than that, 1970. Tom Hoy came through with a twin fin, so I made those, cut my foot on the fin. I'm not going to ride them for a while, and did later. Then later in the 70s, I was really into twin fins and twin fins with a trailer. Mm-hmm. And then 81, Simon did the 3 fins the same size.
Yep.
Blew the world apart. And so through the 80s, things were pretty stable. And we just got a bit finer and finer. Mm-hmm. Simon's boards were big and clunky for a big guy. Mm-hmm. But we fined them down, and until I finally saw, at the end of the 80s, when I finally saw Al's boards, and I went, the shortboard is done. Mm-hmm. It's complete. The thruster, designed by Al Merrick, the shortboard is done. Like a snowboard is done.
Yeah.
You know?
What was it that Al Merrick did that was so great? I mean, you mentioned earlier the bottom curves, but why do you think it was Al?
He had great surfers. He had incredible focus. He had a tight circle. And his team, they lived and breathed together. They shared house together and mentored the kids. And Curran was such a fabulous surfer and test rider. Yeah. So that combination to me cemented the 3-fin design by the end of the 80s. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As a designer, and I know you're a surfer, you're a father, you're a family man, etc., but thinking about the design part, what were your kind of motivations or inspirations? Were your peers in the surfboard realm, or did you look to other designers? Were there other inventors that were inspiring to you?
I learned a long time ago that Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb, but one of his people did, and he financed it. So, to me, Edison invented the light bulb. Simon Anderson invented the thruster, but other people contributed all the way along. Mm-hmm. And so surfing design is a blend of other people's ideas and then cementing them together into your own brand, your own model, your own designs. So, there were a lot of people I respect right through that era. And I mentioned Brewer for his beautiful templates, and Al, Greenough, for a start, he was the first planing surfer. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a displacement surfer, he was a planing surfer. Yeah. And I wanted to pursue that. So I got a lot from those guys. Bob Cooper, okay, he was displacement surfer, but he had the stories, and which hope a young Aussie guy's brain and possibilities and the wonder of what's possible. Yeah. So Brewer was great at that. Yater, his rails were so... I saw Yater trimming at Noosa in 1964 and making sections we couldn't. So I go to Rennie, what is it? And he said, you got to flatten up the trim zone up front. I did that straight away, and Nat won the world contest. His rocker on that Magic Sam, it's got flat rocker 2/3 forward, a very potent trim zone. Mm-hmm. And I've knocked moles off boards that I made in that era and replicate them today, 3-dimensional fiberglass moles to slap on the rail that gives you that trim zone. And so that was a great contribution. Mm-hmm. I love Matt Kivlin's rails, from the 40s. Yeah. He's got the sweetest rails and a tiny bit of hull, so you can step forward and the thing is displacement, but the centre of the board is like Skip's today. It's displacement, but it's got a lot of lift still coming from it, so it sits high. The double concaves that Skip and Josh Hall ran down the centre next to the stringers is a high planing device, yet the rails are displacement. So trim boards are gliders, anything over 10 feet into that realm, is a fascinating area of research right now, and it's just moving ahead fast.
Yeah.
You know, for example, the twin fin versions, like Josh makes a lot of, and Skip doesn't. He's still with single fins, but Skip's going lighter and finer stringers and less glass. So he said, you know, I got to carry the things down the beach. So now we're getting into much lighter gliders, and twin fin gliders like Josh is doing, they're fast. They're super fast. Stranger turn, but their trim speed is phenomenal. So they're the best displacement. Well, Joe Quigg would be rolling in his grave if he could see how fast we're going on our gliders now. Because like he and Kivlin and Simmons were doing it in the 40s and 50s, but now we've had more time to develop it. And we are trimming, all of us who are gliders are trimming real quick in tiny waves. And it's a whole new realm to most surfers.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's one of the things that we love doing is gliders. I'm still working on it. The Yata rocker, the flat zone unit from 1964. And it's a very fertile zone right now.
Yeah, yeah. You wrote a book called Stoked.
Yep.
And in it, you stow away on a boat.
Yeah.
Can you tell? There will be listeners who don't know the story.
I just had to get to Hawaii, you know. Like I've been intrigued by it since the 50s, and I bought a book when I was a kid with the big waves of Hawaii, and you got the photos of Makaha and incredible stuff. And I'd walk around the streets in Brisbane where I was an office boy and then radio station kid, looking at telegraph poles and realising they were the height of the waves you're talking about in Hawaii. So, and city buildings were at that height. And I'm walking around delivering letters or doing something for the radio station, picturing these buildings turning into walls that were cascading and bowling, you know. So, I was a 15-year-old kid going, these buildings had to turn into waves. That's what it's like in Hawaii. So in 63, I'd already started shaping in Sydney. I was 19, and my mates were leaving on a ship. And I was going, hell, I'm going. So another buddy, he just got the sack from a greenkeeping job at Long Reef, and said, come on, Dave, we're going to go to Hawaii today. The boys are leaving, we're going with them. So we walked onto the ship to farewell our buddies. We've got the everybody come ashore, the blast of the horn. We stayed.
And how'd you stay? Where did you slide off to?
We slept under the bunks. The Aussie guys had a bunk down on F deck, the cheapest deck, and they were 3 bunks high on each side, like 6 people in a bunk room. But there was a little 10-inch gap under them. So Chidgy and I would slide in there at night and sleep underneath those guys. Get up before dawn because the stewards would come at 6 o'clock and give everyone a cup of tea, the Indian stewards, checking for the action for the night, who'd slept where, you know, they're part of their job. So we got out before they came around and we'd jog the decks, and like we were doing training for surfing in Hawaii, which is rubbish. Who trains? You are fit. You are, you know, we are running around the pool all day. But while we're jogging around the decks every day, the old guys, the rich people up in the A class with the nice cabins, the captain kindly opened up the gates on each side so we could run the full circumference of the ship every morning. And the old guys could see us go. We'd go padding past, jogging around, and they started to join us. And in the end, it was the stowaways who were leading the fitness class in the morning, running around the deck before 6 o'clock.
Incredible.
So cheeky.
Wow.
Oh, we had, you know, it was great. We had no access to the kitchen or the food, so we got off in New Zealand and pigged out on food, and got off in Tahiti and Fiji and pigged out on fruit. And
how many days when you left Sydney to where you landed?
10 days.
Okay. And how did it go when you got to Hawaii and you knew you had to now you have to exit this thing and not get caught? How was that?
Well, we had the Aussie guys were so incredibly kind and fun, and they weren't afraid of them getting busted in. But they rented a house at Sunset, empty house from Kamiland.
Oh yeah,
Japanese.
I remember Kamiland.
They rented a house for like $30 a month or something. We had no bedding, so we got some cardboard cartons from Camis and slept on cartons right on Sunset Point. And we were there for 5 weeks before we got busted because a cub reporter in Australia, used to write the Midget Farrelly surf column in the Sunday paper, and she wrote, "Missing surfers, Bob McTavish and Dave Chidgey, last seen farewelling their mates on the SS Orsova on the 10th of November. Looks like you made it. Have fun, fellas." So the American consulate's son was a surfer, reading the weekly surf column. "Hey, Dad, look at this."
Oh, man.
So next day we were locked up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Nice. The immigration was super nice. They were really kind to us. In jail for a couple of nights, then went to court. The judge said, "Why did you guys stow away?" He said, "Just surf your waves. You've got the best waves in the world." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yep." "Well, I'll tell you what. You go home and save your money. I'm a friend of the Duke of Hanamoku's. When you come back, I'll introduce you to the Duke."
Wow.
I said, "Thank you." It was Christmas Eve, and it was a Christmas present. And they put us on a Pan Am jet. I'd never been on a plane in my life. And put us on a Pan Am jet to Sydney. And got to Sydney. I didn't want to get arrested, so I jumped and ran from all the reporters and the press. And my mate buzzed off to Queensland. So they couldn't catch us. 500 miles, we disappeared from Sydney.
But then you did get to go several times after that, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
And did you get to meet the Duke?
I did. I went back. I was invited to the Duke contest in '67.
Okay.
And I was with Jock Sutherland and Jeff Hackman and that whole crew. And they were kids. By then I'm 23 years old. And I could legally drink. Mm-hmm. But Jeff and Jock couldn't. So they said, Bob, can you get us a beer? Get us a beer. I said, sure. So I went and got them, smuggling them beers in the Royal Hawaiian. Mm-hmm. But here's poor Duke sitting by himself, stuffed up in the corner. So I got them a beer and I went straight to Duke and sat down and spent the night talking with Duke through 67. That was sometime in November 67. And we talked about how he first came to Australia and introduced solid wood surfboards to Sydney in 1915. And then he came back again in 64 for the World Contest when Midget won it. Mm-hmm. But just talking to Duke about the old days, and he was so humble and so nice, and he had the same buzz, though. He had the stoke when you got onto specific waves, and he's talking about certain waves he'd ridden, and the enthusiasm, his eyes lit up. Mm-hmm. He had the same stoke that we all have.
That's such a great thing. It's wonderful seeing that in surfers over 70 years old, you know, and you certainly have it, but it's it kind of speaks well about the surfing life, you know?
Yes, totally. Yeah, the surfing life is the thing.
Yeah.
I see it as it's your contact with the wild, you know. I can't think of a better word, but it's creation, it's involvement with the planet, you know, and the natural cycles.
Yeah.
And especially here in Australia, we're very wind sensitive. Mm-hmm. And despite all the surf forecasting that goes on, you really don't know what the surf's going to be like each day. You know, you get fairly good indications now, but, you know, the sandbanks move here a lot, and wind conditions and tides. It's a real combination game here, getting the combos right.
Yeah.
And that never gets old.
Yeah. You're still surfing regularly?
Yes. Yeah. I guess I'm probably surfing weekly now, once or twice a week instead of daily.
Yeah.
And that's because I've reached a certain age that my wife and I need to have fun together. I've been doing too much by myself, working, designing, shaping, surfing. It's all me. Mm-hmm. And he's my partner for 54 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll be honest, like, it's a countdown time now, you know. We've got to enjoy life while we're still fit and not in wheelchairs, you know.
Yep.
So I spent a lot of time with Lynn.
Yep. And how did you meet Lynn?
Man, how deep should I go? Basically, she walked into a party, and I looked at this girl and went, it's at Noosa. There was a party every night in that era, 1970. Next day I saw her at the pub at Noosa and had to buy her a drink. But then I was surprised that I had a 18-month-old daughter from a previous marriage, which was on the rocks. Mm-hmm. she was 18, and she embraced my little girl and me, and we moved in together. And I'm so sad when I think back of her parents to see their golden girl heading off to become a teacher, with scholarships and stuff. And she's fallen in love with this little funky surf rat with a 18-month-old daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I've got no money and no prospects. I'm just a surf bum. Poor parents. I don't think her mum ever got to like me before she passed away. Not really.
Really?
Her dad did. If you drink enough beer with him, you got to be his buddy.
Uh-huh. But it's interesting because what you just said is, for a lot of younger listeners to this podcast, they won't be aware of how kind of on the margin surfing and surfers once were, and what kind of dirt bags we were.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that when you first came to surfing in those probably the first couple of decades? What was that like?
I'd already got the sack from radio station 4BH, and I was living in the first aid room at a surf club at Caloundra. They wouldn't let me in the clubhouse weekdays. That was reserved for the weekend. So I just slept in the first aid room, rescuing people on my board through the week. They'd get into trouble in the rips, and I'd paddle out and save them. I was 17 years old. Okay, so Bruce Brown came to town. There was going to be surf movies. What? Surf movies? 1961, and Bruce went to a theatre in Brisbane that carried 1,400 people in those days, massive picture houses. And Bruce was set up in the middle of the audience with his projector, standing on the platform in his white suit with a floral shirt underneath, commentary and microphone in his hand, fading the music up and down, and live commentary. And that night, he showed Barefoot Adventure and Slippery When Wet. I just went, that night, that's it, I'm done. I'm a surf bum.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do any more with radio. I was going to have a media life, radio and TV, and I just went, no, I'm just going to surf every day from today. And I did.
Wow.
And I had nothing. I had one pair of shorts that I'd surf in, sleep in, shape boards in, sanding boards to start with.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Sydney, hitchhiked to Sydney and started sanding. I just hosed my shorts off, hitchhiked home. Home was a car, an old car pushed up on the beach at Avalon in the car park. And me and the other sander, Min Mouse, would share this old car to live in. Had no money. We had to beg down at the local milk bar if we could pay on Friday, if he'd give us a hamburger now. It was Wimpy's Burgers.
Yes. And did you ever question it? Did you ever think I need to...
No, I never questioned.
What about when you started bringing children into the world? And the kind of mortgages and what
mortgages and children.
Yeah. Yes.
That was a big shock.
Uh-huh.
And I had to learn to work, and I became a good, hard-working shaper.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a 20-a-week shaper through all those eras, and knuckle down. And I can't go surfing. I've got to shape.
Yeah.
So that was through the 70s, and then I got addicted to windsurfing in the late 70s and 80s as well. Got twice as bad. And then I got curious about from windsurfing. You get really curious about moulding techniques and vacuum bagging and epoxies and all the construction systems. And so in the 80s, I embarked on a project. Well, then we built a house and we had a mortgage and we're doing okay. I tried retail and I was hopeless at that. And then... went to, mortgage. Yes, moulded surfboards. When I realised that there was shapes in the 80s were so sketchy, really sketchy. And, there were famous shapers around in Hawaii and Australia, and they were doing good boards. But it was so unreliable. You didn't, for a customer to come to a shop and, what do I buy? There was so little knowledge that I decided if we had a moulding system like windsurfers, you could reproduce Tom Curran's boards. They could reproduce Merrick's designs. They could Al Burns
6 channels.
6 channels.
I remember those.
Well, I started making all these designs, and Nev Hyman's boards for Munga. And so we were moulding these guys, and I got about 2,000 boards out, and they started blowing up. because I'd fiddled with the production line.
Okay.
And I'd added a polystyrene block into the urethane foam, and after some months they would delaminate. So I had to virtually trash 2,000 boards, feeling horrible for them. There was an environmental thing too, because once you closed the mould, there was no waste.
Yeah.
Everything was stayed in the mould. And we could produce the actual board really cheaply, fins already in, but they come off really brown and ugly. So you had to put them through a finishing process, which is very labour intensive. And in Australia, the price, it costs $110 to get them off the mould, hot, powerful, cured, strong as hell, fins in, leg wrap plug in. But then it costs you another $250 to get them sanded and filled and painted and glossed and logoed. And in Australia, the wages are so high for that sort of work that the board ended up costing you $500, and they're only retailing for $500. So we got squeezed out. But then I was in touch with Randy French up in Santa Cruz, and he took the concept. We were both faxing to each other about what we're doing, and Randy took it to Cobra and became Surf Tech, and he killed it. And I don't know how many he was doing, but many hundreds of thousands a year. And it was a good system. I've still got one of Randy's Surf Techs that he shaped to my design, and I still surf it regularly. 30-year-old board.
Yeah.
But anyway, I took a dump and lost everything. House sold.
Wow.
I was 100,000 down. So all I could do, and this was the beginning of the 90s, so I'm back to shaping. And I just started shaping like crazy, and I was flying to Eddie Talbot's in Hermosa Beach and shaping over there and shaping everywhere I could, flying to Japan and shaping bunches of boards. Came back from Eddie Talbot's one time after a blazing trip where I was shaping 8 longboards a night.
Jeez.
And every day, Pat Ryan would take over the room and shape, and I'd sleep in the hotel across the street. I'd check on at 6 o'clock at night, shape 4 boards to midnight, walk to Ralph's across the street, get a 6-pack of Coronas. I'd roll myself 1 board, 1 Corona, 1 board, 1 Corona. I'd get through another 4. And so by dawn, I'd done 8 boards. Did that for about 3 weeks. And Eddie says, gave me a bunch of cash, like over 20,000 US dollars. And the dollar in Australia then was 52 cents. I get back here, that 20,000 became 30,000, 35,000. Go to the bank. I paid out my $100,000 loan already, but my overdraft that I had. Bank, will you back me in a block of land? I said, yep.
Yep. What's been most meaningful in your life?
Oh, getting to know the creator of the planet and coming to respect his way of living. Next is my wife. Marriage is an amazing thing. And man and woman together for life.
Yeah.
What a perfect setup.
Yeah.
And not easy.
Yep.
You've got to be good forgivers.
Yep.
But that comes with a package.
Yeah. But elaborate. I'd love for you to elaborate on that, because it's something that not many people talk about and not many men talk about. And I'm a big lover, Bob.
Yeah. I mean, women are incredible. Okay, so an old guy, when I married, I was young, and an old bloke said to me, you know, you married your girl, your wife. You didn't marry your kids. He said, look, your kids will grow up and leave, but your girl's still there. So you must keep the romance alive. You must. No matter, it'll be tough at times with all the kids and the stresses and no money and long nights trying to settle kids down. But keep her number one, because you're married to her, not the children.
Yeah.
And that advice worked for me.
Yeah, that's so good. There are probably a lot of shapers who will listen to this podcast and they'll want advice on shaping, but there are probably even more married people, men and women, who would love for marriage advice. You got any marriage advice?
You got to be a good forgiver, both of you. And we made a policy that we don't go to sleep at night unless we've settled. So we don't carry arguments and disagreements to the next day.
This is so good.
You wake up fresh every day
Yep.
in good terms.
So good, Bob.
54 years.
I'm writing that in my notebook.
It's a Bible principle.
Yeah. Yeah.
That says, don't go to bed unsettled. Sort it out.
Yep.
Yeah.
What about your book, Stoked? What was it like writing your book and kind of mining your memories, your life?
It just probably came too easy. I don't know. You're drawn that way, as a character. And I was good at writing. And when I was a kid, when I was 12 years old, I got an award for the best writer in Queensland for that school year. And so I just wrote a short story with adventure in it, and I got an award as best one of the year. So I had a gift for writing.
Yeah.
And so I didn't put, I know many writers put so much wonderful work into their books. And I read mine now and go, it's pretty simple. It's only simple language, but the content, it's always got to have a good story. To me, it's not about writing techniques, and there's lots of flashy writers around.
Yeah.
But often the stories are, and they drag. So me, I just had to have yarns, they're yarns about what happened and fun stuff.
Yep. Do you read a lot?
Read, yeah. My wife and I read to each other. We share books, historical or novels about history, and we take on the characters and read to each other, a couple of chapters. At the beach, under an umbrella, under a palm tree, we always go to the beach with a book.
Nice.
One book between the two of us.
So great.
So nice.
Yeah. And what is the surfing experience like for you now? At your what is or another way of framing it is, how do you keep the stoke alive?
The pop-up gets harder when you're older. I've had both hips replaced, both knees replaced, cancer 3 years ago, and the time out of the water makes it harder. So I have to do a few push-ups every night, and I have to force myself to pop up when I paddle for a wave. It's too easy to just lie down. Like I said to Skip last week, "You still surfing, Skip?" And he goes, "Yeah, 5 waves a day." I stand up on 2.5. We both get it,
Yep. Do you still love the shaping community as much as ever?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. You've had a big life, Bob, and I wonder if ever along the way did you ever question, is this the path?
Never. No, surfing. It's funny. Last night at a gig in Sydney, I passed the observation that we were the surf bums, like you said, and we truly were. We were the riffraff of society. But all general society has lowered their standards to surfing standards now. They've realised how good it is to be connected with the rhythms of the ocean and instead of being just locked into the 9 to 5 and everything, and simpler life, simpler objectives.
Yeah. The rhythms of the ocean. I like
rhythms
that.
of the ocean.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
What a pleasure.
So
Thanks
great
for having
chatting.
me.
Yeah, Bob, so much appreciation and respect for you.
Thank you, mate.
Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal and is produced by me, Jamie Brissick, and Jonathan Shiflett. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Our theme song is Give Me a Wave by Oscar Matsumiya and Paz Lenchantin. The Surfer's Journal is a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from FCS, Finisterre, Howler Brothers, Outerknown, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. The journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. This episode of Soundings is presented by Costa Sunglasses, the badge of the explorer. For over 40 years and counting, Costa has remained steadfast in their dedication to not only crafting the most durable, functional, and long-lasting eyewear, but in protecting our waterways and natural resources. Whether you're on the back deck scanning for yellowtail, eyeing a set swinging wide at an empty point, camped out on a bluff at the end of a rotted 2-track, or anywhere and everywhere in between, Costas are built to help you see what's out there. Head over to costadelmar.com today to find just the right pair for you, no matter where the water takes you. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.